Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. Welcome back to the SOS or Shout Out Show. This is me, your host, Preacher Moss. Yet another day, yet another day, yet another day. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be on this side of the dirt, as OG said. But then again, some days you say, man, are other people willing and happy and appreciative to be on this side of the dirt as we join you? The fact of the matter is we have another situation here in the United States where COVID is running amok. When I say COVID is running amok, I mean that not that COVID is running amok. We know how to deal with COVID-19. We don't know how to cure it, but we know how to deal with it in the aspect that we have strategies, scenarios, and situations that allow us to at least marginalize and in some factors reduce the effects of COVID. But the human will isn't there. The human will isn't there. And so today's topic is say it, failure is not an option. Say it, failure is not an option. Now, normally when you say failure is not an option, we're talking about the rah-rah, like, you need to try harder. But in this day, brothers and sisters, of COVID, of ineffective leadership, the idea of failure not being an option is the fact that people actually refuse to recognize when they fail. They refuse to recognize when they fail, and therein lies the danger. We all know that failure is an option. We're not perfect. We're not perfect in our thinking. We're not perfect in our execution. Therefore, it would appear to me, or it would at least register on my spirit, that yes, we can fail. That's a part of religious tradition. We fail, but we lean on mercy to bring us back. And for those who are not religious, that's fine. Let me move you to the side. We fail in the idea that we learn from our failures. And in that, where you can add the word, we just don't fail. Again, we fail up, getting closer and closer to our goal. Where are we now when people absolutely refuse to acknowledge that they failed? That is a sickness. That's a psychosis. That is something, a syndrome, if you will. We call it refusal to fail syndrome, I guess, because in that, there are no lessons learned. And the lessons that are learned are lies that we choose to perpetuate. We have a situation scenario where people refuse to acknowledge failure. I can remember a certain president who said at one point in time that the death of people from coronavirus was probably going to cap around 60,000 people. We're now at over 126,000 people who are dying. And, and I would be okay with it. I would be okay with it. I mean, I'm not happy about it. People are going to return home anyway. But here's my point. The absence of acknowledging failure allows people to think that it's okay. From leadership, it's not okay. From leadership, that's not acceptable. We are in a space and in time where people have fallen into these traps of absolutism. Either it's this or nothing else exists. So for leadership and some people, either coronavirus has gone away or I just won't acknowledge anything else. I won't acknowledge that it's there. I won't acknowledge that it's still killing people. I won't acknowledge that. I'll acknowledge only the things that allow me to think I've been successful. For example, the job numbers. The job numbers were higher than expected, but you still have a record number of people who are still out of work. Therefore, our system, to the point, while it's corrected some things, it's not 100% correct. Therefore, you have a space of failure, and you recognize and look at it and say, in that space of failure, I can make improvements. We're not having that right now. It's this very despondent, disconnected response to the realities around us. And the realities around us, ladies and gentlemen, call it what it is, happy, sad, good, bad, whatever, it's killing us. And it's not the coronavirus that's just killing us. It's the attitudes that abate the idea that we need to address things seriously. People, listen to that. Do you hear what I hear? I hear less protests. I hear let's support our black brothers and sisters. You know why? Because people think they have done the job. I've done the job. I've established a precedent. I've been seen. I've been heard. But it doesn't mean it's over. You were successful in establishing the need, establishing awareness, but you haven't addressed the problem. Even after George Howard, call it what it is, people are still dying. There's no one who's been indicted for the death of Breonna Taylor. We have all these things because we live in a society that's so short-sighted, brothers and sisters, so short-sighted that they cut off activity, cut off conversations, thinking if I do that, somehow, somewhere, I am not a failure. Well, Paul, let me tell you something. And for all my brothers and sisters that did the protests and all of that, let me tell you something. There was something that was called the Montgomery bus boycott. Now, the Montgomery bus boycott began, of course, people say with Rosa Parks. Well, let's be real clear. There were several thousand people involved with the bus boycotts other than Rosa Parks. And if you really want to get racial about it, there were dark-skinned women who did the same thing as Rosa Parks. Didn't get the attention, but Rosa Parks got the attention. God bless her. But it was strategic, because a dark-skinned black woman just got beaten off, thrown off the bus. This woman was educated, and she of course, she knew the system, she knew the laws, and they fought that way. But what was interesting was failure in that regard allowed him to put together a better plan, a better strategy. For those of you who don't know about the civil rights movement, failure was an option because that was the only way they could learn how not to fail that way again. We're not in those times, brothers and sisters, when there's some weird times where folks think that if I have 10 problems and I solve 50 of them, I'm 50% correct. No, you're 50% the way, in my point of view, you're 50% away from a complete success, which means that your fail rate is still 50%. We like the numbers. We like big numbers. We like to manipulate statistics. But statistics and big numbers are representative of a problem. You take the statistics and the numbers out of the way, you're still dealing with the aspect of service, problems, and resolutions. This reads, brothers and sisters, like my I have some students that I teach comedy writing to, and I teach them three things. The first thing is the scene, the second thing is a conflict, and the third thing is a resolution. Scene, conflict, resolution. We look at scene, don't understand or reject conflict, and think that's the resolution. You can't do it that way. We're literally dying. When I say literally dying, we're talking about kids in daycare being infected by coronavirus. And it's not just the coronavirus, people. It's all interconnected. Child gets sick from coronavirus. The parent that is working has to come home and mind the child. Once the parent's there, the parent can't go back into work. They got to quarantine for 14 days. Now you see what I'm saying. All these things are interconnected. And what I even put out there a little bit further, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What I even put out there a little bit further is this. Have we gotten to the point where we pay lip service to our own inability to step up to the plate? So when I say failure is not an option, of course it's an option. It's an option we're not willing to settle for, but it's an option. It's an option that's going to reframe what I'm going to do. If I do fail, I'll understand not to fail that way. Have we become a society, for lack of a better word, that's run out of options for our own BS? In the United States right now, it'd be interesting, we could all fly out of the country and go somewhere where people get to tune in now and look at how democracy works for America. Look how the greatest country in the world operates under crisis. Look at the leadership that's responsible for its people and still not able to protect its own people. You have the information, you have the resources, you have the positioning of government, you have some of the best doctors in the world, and you still can't somehow drum up the will for people to wear a mask. Mask, people. And I have to say this. This was happening long before COVID-19. It was happening long before George Floyd. We are, for lack of a better word, we're a result of poor decisions. We're a result, at some point in time, of looking the other way, how we treated other countries, how we treated other people, how we treated other epidemics. And those things come home to roost. I talked about the American Constitution, American white supremacy being this child that never grows up. It's the child that never grows up. And that child is killing the adults. It's killing the kids too, but it's killing the adults, meaning that we don't have any kind of meaningful dialogue. I don't feel like I had leadership that I can go to. In the last 3.5 years, you've seen the growth of leaderless organizations, some of them even terrorist organizations, because even the terrorist organizations are going, at this rate, we can't survive. We can't even do terrorism at this rate because we can't even, literally, we can't function. And that this whole thing about failure is not an option belies the fact that we don't have full functionality in the United States. We're not talking about new jobs. We're not talking about new health. We're not talking about new medicine. We're not talking about anything new. Everything is returned to what happened. This whole thing about reopening and closing, it's like Groundhog's Day. We knew it was going to happen. Anyone who's in the audience that didn't think that if you sent people out, let me make this real clear, that you sent people out who have been isolated in quarantine in sterile environments, as sterile as you can get, you sent them out into the world, that you weren't going to have this as a problem? You were not going to have this as a problem? Let me tell you something from my perspective. Let me tell you something from my perspective. This is an African American perspective. Failure is always going to be an option because I'm looking at the people who I've had to entrust, not willingly, entrust. Not with precision, entrust, not with confidence, but I've had to entrust them to do the right thing. Step up to the plate and do the right thing. And they have consistently failed me. So guess what, brothers and sisters? Say it. Failure is an option. If you're looking at people who consistently fail, if you're looking at a system that consistently lets you down, if you're looking at a system that's broken, it's going to fail. And it's going to evidence itself in things like COVID-19. It's going to evidence itself in things like police brutality. It's going to evidence themselves in school closings. It's going to evidence themselves in children not being able to eat properly. It's going to evidence themselves in people losing jobs because the system has failed. And if the system fails, why wouldn't failure be an option? But there's something else. There's something else. The will of the people has not failed. The willingness to get up and try over and over and over again has not failed. The esprit de corps that all of us have, despite everything that's going on, has allowed us to look up and look to one another and go, we know the system is not going to do what it's supposed to do at this point in time, and we won't rule it out. I won't say it's a consistent failure, a totally failed system, because you have to have belief. But I also am not afraid to say that I've looked at it over a period of years. A period of years where we had hope, a period of years where we had despair. And even then, those things, fortunately, did not frame in my mind that, hey, we can't be successful. Part of being successful is not engaging systems and people in politics and ideology that fail us consistently. And you can always tell when it's a failing system because, doggone it, when they fail, they never want to admit failure. There's nothing that's been the most goofiest thing I've seen in a while. The goofiest thing I've seen in a while. Then leadership who won't wear a mask, or they tell everyone else don't wear a mask because I'm not going to wear a mask because they don't want to be wrong. That's a benchmark of a failure. I don't want you to evidence the fact that I've made a bad decision. So I want you to risk your health because it looks like I'm risking my health. And people have gone nuts. In Alabama, they're having COVID parties. Young people believing it's fun to get COVID, or it's positive, or it's profitable having COVID parties where they get together and whoever gets sick, they bet on whoever gets sick. Whoever gets sick first wins the pot of money. This is the illness, people. People have framed COVID illness where there's success because I can win money because of it. I mean, think of it, folks. We've had industries that have totally turned around based on the fact that we have these failures, that we have a consistent letdown in leadership and a consistent letdown in community and a consistent letdown in the protocols, in the institutions that we've put trust in over and over and over again. And COVID was not the first time. Our banks have failed us. The housing industry have failed us. We have these situations, scenarios where I am saying, for lack of a better word, we need to step back. This is the time we need to step back. When we look at this whole scenario, if you will, and I mean being critical from point A to point B to point C, I'm going to ask all of us to step back and let's make some real decisions. Recently, you know what? I found, even in some of my own ideologies, I'm not 100% correct. And I found joy in that. I found joy in that. Things that I was somewhat secure about, I found joy in that I wasn't, because it meant that I had even more space to learn. And maybe people don't see it like that, and it's okay. But to me, failure is an option if I want to be successful. Failure is an option if I want to be able to be humble, and accept the fact that though my idea may be good, there may be an idea that may be greater. Though my idea may be almost finished, there's an idea that's been pre-existing for a long time. I just have to open up myself to the fact and the willingness that the better, the improved, the greater is not something that I fear, but something that I embrace. And maybe some of our brothers and sisters, we need to look at the good, the better, the greater, and begin to embrace that and move away from traditional situations where we have to put our trust in folks. I'm saying, folks, you know what? Think black. Maybe everybody needs to think black, because thinking black is when you wake up in the morning knowing as good as things are for you, somebody wishes that you had a losing hand. The laws wish you had a losing hand. The police in some regards wish you had a losing hand. White supremacy wishes you have a losing hand. But it doesn't matter. They only wish you have a losing hand, not because you're losing, but they've already lost. It's the failure and the phenomena of people who say failure is not an option. Well, that's a fallacy. Hard work, dedication, communication, integrity, perseverance, those are the things that you line up when you say failure is not an option. Because then you're talking about probability, not just reality, probability. Because people say failure is not an option, 9 times out of 10, they're not doing what they need to do. Because anybody, a realist, an idealist, starts with this core concept that as hard as I can work, it may not happen. We all know this. As hard as I may work, something may not happen. As believers, you tell folks, I prayed. You know what? But it might not happen. That blessing may not be for you. That new job may not be for you. That new car, that new wife, whatever, it may not be for you. And it's the injection, and this is why the whole idea of failure is not an option. It's the injection that whatever we're doing requires patience. And the one thing that we haven't had during COVID, brothers and sisters, is sustained patience. The willingness to get up and do something over and over and over and over and over again. And when you see results, particularly positive results, you continue. Or when you see negative results, maybe you work a little bit harder, understanding that the road is longer. It should be no mystery why other countries are opening up from COVID. It's because the will of the people will coalesce in a way where they say, wait a minute, we see the danger in it. And when they say failure is not an option, they're talking about the failure in us, the failure to correlate information, the failure to galvanize public opinion for the welfare of the greater good. That's why I'm saying, and I know we're wrapping up soon, but that's why I'm saying here in the United States, man, we've gotten away from that. And it's worrisome and it's sad because this is an example that we leave for our children. Even more so, this is an example that we leave for ourselves. We are revisiting failing examples. We're not revisiting them, 20, 30 years from now. We're revisiting them 2 months from now, 3 months from now. Not being able to go out and do what we need to do, not being able to go out and be progressive in our thoughts is something that has to be addressed. And you can't wait on elections, brothers and sisters. We can't wait on elections. This COVID thing has been a test of our will, a test of our patience, a test of our discipline. Because at this point in time, we are lacking will, patience, and discipline in full supply. We don't talk the narrative of, you know what? I'm going to dedicate myself. This is the word, dedicate myself to making sure that whatever situation I'm engaged in, whether it's unemployment, whether it's health issues, whether it's war, death, kindness, education, I'm going to dedicate myself to make sure that I'm putting forth my best effort. And effort contains issues of education, communication, integrity. I'm not going to do those things, or I am going to do those things. And then when it doesn't work the way I want to, I'm going to go back and do them again. That's when you say failure is not an option, because it's within your grasp. It's within the things you do. It's not about the result, the external, it's about the internal. And you build your internal, and that's where you get character from. Because one thing about COVID-19 and George Floyd, and they're not talking about it as much as they should be, and I'm talking about OGs, this is a checkup from the neck up about character. Because in the United States right now, we're not talking about character. We're talking about everything else that emanates from character. Good character, but a lot of bad character. And we're not saying the things that we need to be saying. Speaking truth to power. Forget politicians. If you see your neighbor out not doing what they need to do, you need to speak to your neighbor in a caring way, in an ethical way, in a brotherly or sisterly way. You need to speak to them, because that is America. That is community. That is the Ummah. And if we're not going to do that, then everything else is going to fall flat. We have to set the example in a traditional way. We have to set the example in a visible way and bring about that awareness. Bring about that awareness. So maybe this Sunday, maybe 4th of July, when we're not going to be able to do all of our cookouts like we used to and gather, maybe we reverse the cycle and we get on the phone and we call somebody and we say, what are you doing about employment? What are you trying to do about the community? How do you see education getting better? My daughter, my sister, my child has to do online. How can we make our schools better? And stop waiting for everyone else to do the job, knowing they failed miserably doing it before. Create your own systems. I said this before, man. Sometimes when you say failure is not an option, I know when I've said it, or I've thought about failure is not an option, I say, it's an option. It's just an option I don't want to deal with. It's not an option. It's a reality. Nobody chooses to fail, people. That's why saying failure is not an option, it's a reality. If you choose to fail, why would you do it in the first place? Word. So as I close out, brothers and sisters, let's move away from the systems that fail us. Heck, move away from the people that fail you. Move away from the behaviors that fail you. Move away from the food that fails you. And create a new mandate. If not today, tomorrow, or the weekend, 4th of July. Have that good time. But when you roll out of it, I want to see a new dedication. I want to see a new understanding of how we move forward. Stop waiting on politicians for your intelligence. You own your space. You create your own safe space. If that's going to be the deal, then take advantage of it. I will not wait for people to do for me what I know they won't do for me, or worse, they won't do for me well, which means I've engaged in an act of futility. Move away from the futility, if you will. Move away from it. Move away from an ineffective speech. Move away from people that will waste your time because they don't have any. They don't value it. And maybe in those spaces, those small spaces, we develop a new understanding, a new modality whereby I can look at somebody across the way and connect with that person, that they're putting out the attitude, they're putting out the energy, the esprit de corps, the rhythm, the flow, the tone that says, you know what? Failure is not an option. Failure is reality. But here are the things I'm doing to mitigate failure. And when you get there, understand you might be alone. There might not be a whole lot of people there. My words are be patient. Keep doing what you're doing, and hopefully people will see your example, and then you won't be alone for long. You won't be alone for long. And maybe you have groups of people. Maybe you have a city. Maybe you have a town. Maybe you have a country that understands. Say it. Failure is not an option. Why? Because failure is an option is a choice. Failure is reality. And we face it every day. I'm Preacher Moss on the Shout Out Show. God bless you. Tomorrow, I'm going to offer up part 2 of the Hassan Minhaj Dua Dilemma. And I will be talking about that tomorrow. I've talked to some OGs, and I want to give you guys the rest of the story, because too often we like to perk walk. Yeah, we like to perk walk. Somebody does something wrong. We like to walk them down in front of the reporters, and we ask all the questions, clink, 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 because we believe they've done something wrong. But we don't allow the capacity for people to engage and redeem themselves. Preacher Moss, Shout Out Show. See you tomorrow. Take care.